um, and events. Recently this week, there was a very prominent megachurch pastor in the United States who pled guilty to sexual abuse of a minor. Some of us might have heard of that. So that's one example, and that has implications for that minor being hurt in that situation by a prominent, religious figure in their life, and their family is also affected. His family is affected. Recently in Jamaica, there was an significant increase in the number of suicides among students. This is in the last few months. Last week, within the last 2 weeks, I believe, there are also suicides, notable suicides by adults. One was a veteran judge in the court system. I think she was in the system for like 30 plus years. She was found dead at home, and it's suspected that she killed herself. Another gentleman in what we would call in Jamaica like a well-off community, if you could say that, was also suspected to have committed suicide. Prior to that, there was a model. I think she had entered one of these Jamaica Miss Universe beauty pageants. Was also suspected to have committed suicide. And suicide is, one of those very, very tragic things where you ask yourself, what could have been done to prevent it, and what might have led to or caused, what were the factors that may have caused persons to get to that point where they figure, there is no more hope, and this is the way to deal with their various problems. And, I'm citing all of this to put this discussion into context in that there are a lot of persons. Now, you can extrapolate that to St. Vincent. I don't have statistics for St. Vincent. Sometimes stats are hard to come by locally, but we know that these are also challenges that we face here, right? From time to time, these statistics or these situations raise their ugly head, and you ask yourself, is there something, especially if somebody close to you. I had a very close friend, church brother of mine, when I was probably in my 20s at the time, and we talked. Somebody, he and I, if you're one person, he didn't talk to a lot of people at church, right? Both his parents had passed, and I know he was taking a rough, because he was kind of a sheltered child. He was still living with his parents, had been living with his parents as an adult male, right? So they had been very protective of him. So when they died, he took it very hard. So we tried to stay close to him, keep connected to him, and so on. So it was very sad when he was found dead at home. And again, you ask yourself, what could I have done to maybe help, prevent that kind of situation? You have a kind of, what do you call it, survivor's guilt, kind of. Where you figure, you and this person used to talk. What could you have done to maybe, prevent him from taking that last irreversible step? Very tragic. All right, so the first question we put to the panelists is, how much hurt are we carrying as a society? It's a loaded question, but if we can quantify, I don't know. I know we have statistics, but beyond the statistics, I think sometimes we are very good at carrying masks, or wearing masks. Somebody asked how you're doing. I think Pastor Smith touched on this the last in the introduction. He was citing an example of somebody asking a church sister, how are you doing? And the person gave an honest answer and started to list out all the things that was going on in their life. And the person who asked how you're doing said, well, I didn't ask you for all of that. Well, the person said, well, you asked me how I'm doing. So I'm telling you all that is happening to me. So sometimes when you ask how you're doing, are you really prepared? I think that was the point. Are we really prepared for the answer? If somebody was to really tell you how they're doing, right? So It's a tricky thing. We have to play, and this is where as believers in Christ, you know, we really have to operate spiritually, in the spirit, I'm talking about, because it's not just a casual hello sometimes that a person needs. You have to go and probe a little deeper. So, you know, from me, let's hear, how much hurt are we carrying in the society?
Well, as for me, I don't think we can put a measure on it, but we can see clear demonstrations of it. And for me, I would want to say we are carrying a lot. We look at the church setting, we look at the world, and recently in St. Vincent, we see so much crime against women especially. And we ask ourselves, what is happening, what is going on? For those of us in the school system, we're looking at the behavior of the children. So much anger. Everything is about, I'm going to stab, I'm going to kill. Nobody's seeking for peace anymore. And we would normally say hurting people hurt others. If I am hurting, I'm going to be angry. Not only angry at Pastor Smith because he hurt me, but I may extend, and in most cases the anger is extended perhaps to all males, or perhaps to all church members, and we hear that often. I'm not coming back to Kittels. Well, I'm using Kittels because there are Kittels. One person alone hurt you out of 300 members on the books, and you will just stereotype. You put everybody into that same bracket. And so we have to remember that when it comes to hurt, and I'm saying this on an individual level now, I guess we will get down to that little later on, but we are carrying a lot of hurt. And I say to people, when individuals get baptized and they come into the church, when they go under the water, everything is not left under there. There are things in their lives that they come in with, and we have to learn how to help them to deal with these things. So you've been abused. I went to a meeting yesterday, and one of the individuals there, she said in front of everybody, I was abused when I was a child. I did not know that. And I've known this individual for years. We don't know what people are carrying. And sometimes when they don't know how to manage it and handle it and they make an outburst, we are quick to judge, to label. Fran is always upset, her face never look good. But have you taken the time to talk with Fran? Have you taken the time to find out what is happening? So I want to say to us up front as we look at this particular question, let's remember that when individuals come into the church, they are coming in with all these baggages. They don't know how to handle it. We've introduced them to Jesus. They believe that Jesus can take, and he can. But we have to help them through the process. Let us not be quick to label or to judge. Let us be willing to offer a helping hand.
All right, thank you. Yes, Pastor.
Yes, good evening. Nice being back in Kittels after many years. We introduced by talking about suicide. And 3 suicides really have lived with me over the years. One when I walked in Beckway as a pastor, and 2 were 2 celebrities, and you probably know about them, Robin Williams. Is Robin Williams? Mrs. Doubtfire. And there was a guy who I never used to miss on TV. He used to go all over the world. He even came in the Caribbean tasting food. Anthony Bourdain. When he committed suicide, I was really shocked because the same night he did it, the evening before he went up to his room in France, he had one of those sessions where he tasted drinks. And he told his friend something in parable. The friend didn't really understand it until they discovered him dead. And after he finished tasting, he went up in his room and he silently took his life. I remember when I pastored in Beckway, some of the brethren came to me by night. I think it was a Wednesday night, it was after church. And they brought with them a young lady from the countryside. And they started playing talk, throwing things for us to discuss and so. Apparently they knew her situation, but I had no clue. And I talked with them as they made the points, I responded. Maybe they wanted me to understand something that I really wasn't, my antenna wasn't up. And 1 week later, that young lady returned to St. Vincent and committed suicide. And I called all who came to me that night and asked them, did you know that she was pregnant? And they said yes. I said, and you all should have told me. So she wanted somebody to speak with about her pregnancy, because her father, being an elder in the church, one of the churches, she was afraid to go back home and tell them. So she killed herself. We're not going to talk about suicide a lot, but what I want to introduce by saying is that trauma, which is the physical or psychological pain that we experience, and we talk at length in our first session, is real, it hits home, and it hits home hard many times. And one of the things we have to bear in mind is that the things that cause trauma, the traumatic issues in people's lives, are usually not one. Sometimes they're many. And like cross addiction, when somebody is addicted with different groups of drugs, you call it cross addiction, for example, like a stimulant and a hallucinogen, cocaine and marijuana. For example, marijuana being the hallucinogen drug and cocaine be the stimulant. When somebody has those two addictions, they say they are cross addicted. And we have a lot of cross addictions in trauma. And the thing is, trauma is very, the causes are very interconnected. So when somebody is affected by one, it influences others. One of the trauma that we might have in our church, I'm not going to say we do have it, but we might have it, is that of vicarious abuse. And what is vicarious abuse? Well, you know what vicarious is. Christ suffered for us vicariously. You remember that? In other words, he didn't deserve the pain, but he bore it for us. And there are a lot of people in our churches who suffer vicariously, especially children in the homes of mommy and daddy, who might be prominent leaders in the church. But when they close their bedroom door, there's real hell going on. And then the children are victims. They're witness falsely of the pain, but they become victims also. And they suffer from what is called vicarious abuse. And vicarious abuse is not going to trigger neurotransmitters to tell them there's a pain here in the knee. Where did you get the pinch? Or the pain where you got the pinch? But it sends chemicals to the brain and say, you're hurting. And the thing about psychological mental pain is that just like when you get a physical pain, the sister asks, is it hurting still? And she said, no. Because God has made us with certain chemicals in our system to tell us, yes, there is pain, but when that chemical goes there and says there is pain, God has another chemical in our system that is backing up, ready to go and say, get rid of the pain. So it mingles with that area and it quiets the pain. Not so with psychological pain. Psychological pain haunts us and goes with us. And in many cases, I mentioned it in our last meeting, it requires a miracle to be healed from it. Help could also be given in the form of counseling, and there's something called psychotherapy where you administer a longer session, which is more advanced counseling. Sometimes people get rid of it, but it still lingers on. What we have to do as a people is learn to get rid of the problem inside and win the victory. Not just say it, but experience it.
All right, thanks very much for those insights so far. There are some things that you can measure, and there are some things that we really can't. You might get some statistics from the, I think, Royal SVG Police Force, their website. They have some statistics on the different, types of crime and so on, and probably the Ministry of Health, I guess the statistics department could give you some figures in terms of the number of cases of rape, sexual abuse, and so on. But beyond those statistics, beyond those numbers, people are carrying, a lot of baggage. And it's only when you get into really crisis situations sometimes that you might get an inkling as to what is really going on. Now, I've noticed over the past, and again, I'm trying to pay attention to what's happening in the society. I'm noticing quite a number of young men, in particular, vagrant on the road, mentally challenged, mentally ill, as you'd say, some should probably be in the mental health, at the mental health center. But I always ask myself, what led to this? This was once somebody's bouncing baby boy, you know, fresh from the hospital, all right, very promising, and here they are on the street out of their minds, all right, various causes as we know. And it just you know, raises the question, follow-up question, how caring are we as a society? Is it for lack of caring that we have this level of hurt still? Because you could have, okay, persons are exposed to hurtful situations, undergo hurtful situations, but the fact that we are still carrying so much, is it a measure, to what extent is it a measure of the caring factor in our society? And especially from a church point of view, and knowing what we are called to as believers in Christ, you know, how do we use compassion? How do we exercise that Christ-like compassion to help to intervene in these kinds of situations and to prevent people from being further hurt? Because as Sister Holder said, you know, hurt people, right? So if you can sort of, you know, nip this hurt or the effects of the hurt in the bud, then, you know, you could prevent, as the Bible says, prevent a multitude of sins, you know, ensuing from that. All right, so how caring are we? I don't know how you measure that again. All right, maybe you measure the caring by how much we are addressing, but let me throw that one to the panelists. How caring are we as a society, and how much more caring can we be in practical terms to address this issue?
Every time there's a trauma in not just the society, but the world, it affects us as individuals. And we just had a real major catastrophe in COVID. Prior to that, we had HIV, which for many years they couldn't get around, and it was just killing people like flies. That also affected us. And every now and again, there's something that comes around that is pandemic and affects us locally. The danger of it is that when these things happen globally and it comes home, we suffer to some extent. And we are on here, but I have to say this. This is the healthiest AY I've seen since 2019. Yeah.
Amen for that.
And I say that because, and COVID is not the problem now. So that is I'm just making that point to show how things affect us psychologically. That people became laid back, they became concerned, a lot of people became mortally afraid of dying, and so they became so settled at home that they prefer to stay there now. But I tell brethren, if you're going to invite me to preach on a Sunday night, I still prefer to go under a street light than to go online. But the thing is, we don't want to go out anymore since COVID. And I want to challenge us that we can still go out. And we can still do the things that we used to do. But the thing about it is that I want to talk about social isolation and our traumatic experience. That is why I mentioned that. Because social isolation is real. We become, I don't want to use the term, it's not institutionalized, I want to use, but that's what happens as families, but we become so canned in ourselves that we don't look out for the other person again when trauma take place. When people become traumatic, the schema is so severe that it affects us physically and it affects us socially. And what is happening in our society is, not just in St. Vincent, and it's now coming here, But as we mentioned, in some parts of the world, it's affecting them more than us. What is happening is that people have become so isolated socially that they have also become what we call in counseling existential isolation. Social isolation, isolated from each other. Existential isolation, isolation from self. So we become isolated from our own selves.
Just an interjection, sorry. We have more social media now than we did 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We have more people online than we did 5 years ago.
Yes.
3 years ago, right? So how is it that we are more connected
But yet,
by social media, all right, but we are more isolated? Or you explain it?
that is what we call a dichotomy, a split. How can it? But there are so many of them. How can we come to church as a congregation and a member goes home and, well, it doesn't happen here, but I mentioned an example of it, and a member goes home and commits suicide. We are here, but we're not really here. And that is where the pain is. And what we need to do is to become very much more connected with one another. Are we here? Am I here? Yes. Is that person here? Also, yes. It's a hard thing, but we have moved away from it, and we need to come back. You know, I prepared something on the systems theory by a guy you read, Bonfriend Benner. I don't know if you'll get some time to look at it, but I think he draws the picture, not perfectly, but he is really close to what is happening in his ecosystem, ecological system theory, where we first become isolated as family, then we become isolated as a society, then we could become isolated as institutions in the society, then we become isolated as a nation, and fifthly, we become isolated among us as a world, as the world. And the whole system is wrapped up in the problems that we're having today. Very good.
So I want to take a different slant, but it's going to add what Pastor said. We are a caring church. We are. And we are a caring community too. We have social welfare, we have community services, and I can tell you almost every time I pass, somebody's at Kittel's church doing something downstairs, distributing clothes or something. We are good with that. Very good. But my concern with the care comes, as Pastor was talking about, that connectedness with individuals. And Pastor asked a question just now. How can you come to church and you're going back home? I have food at my house, well prepared, everything. You are sitting right next to me. We are sharing lessons, we are doing everything, and I'm saying, hold on, brother, hold on, sister. And I would walk out that door to feast and eat at home. And you are going home to nothing. That speaks volume for us as a church. We are to bear you one another's and so fulfill what? That's where we are missing it. Sometimes we are so quick to give to those on the outside and we neglect those within the very household of faith. The deacons were set up so that they could do what? They could help the widows and minister to their needs. And so when we talk about caring and reaching out to people, we have to at some point get into people's business. Now some may look at it and get into people's business. Yes, we have to become so concerned because you are my brother and you are my sister. It doesn't mean I'm going to ask what you eat last night, what you sleep last night, and so on. But we have to show genuineness. Be truly concerned. Your problem becomes my problem because why? We are traveling on the same path to heaven. And it sounds bad and looks really bad that somebody would say, boy, I didn't have this and I was going through this. And then we say, but I never know that. But did you take the time? So yes, we have social media. Yes, we have so many platforms. Ask about your friends and your followers on Instagram. 200. My phone, if you check my phone, I have over 800 contacts. And if I have a problem, Elder Patterson, there are about 3 persons I would call. 3. 3, Elder Jackson. So we have a lot of acquaintances, a lot of people we will talk to, but if there's something bothering me deep and I really want to open up and share, there are 3 persons I would call. Each of us, ask yourself as we sit here today, if I have a real problem, and when I talk about real problem, I know so let's say I am thinking about suicide. Who can you call from the church? And you can feel comfortable and you can say, boy, I can call Brother Young because, you know, I will say, you think about that and you're married to the pastor? First thing we do, we start pointing. We start saying, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't behave that way. We are real people, and Elder brought it out. We have real circumstances, real situations. There are pressures that we are going through. Why? Because we live in an earth filled with sin. And we have to come to terms with that. Christians can be depressed. Christians can think of suicide. What would I do if I have that issue? I say to my husband as a minister, if you have some thoughts, maybe you're addicted to porn or something, is there another pastor you can call and talk to? Can you go to your administrator? Can you go to the ministerial secretary? But then I want us to think about these things, you know. Because people go and but we don't say commit suicide, we say died of suicide. They died of suicide. Why? Because the first thing is, if I reveal this, then people are going to say, I shouldn't have. And so my concern to, again, when we come to the church and caring, we have to be willing to listen. And to listen without judgment. People are afraid of that. Because the first thing we are going to say, you shouldn't. You've been preaching all crusades at Jackson, you shouldn't think like that. And you are telling people this. That's not good. And immediately you shut up. You hold it inside because people don't see you as an individual that is still struggling. And this may be the area where the devil is trying to trip me up. So my interjection here, Pastor and Elder Patterson, for this area is that our church needs, our members need to be trained in how to deal with people who are hurting. One of the things that I try to stay away from as much as possible, and I was confronted with it because right now I'm doing a course in crisis trauma and rehabilitative counseling. And the first thing we started out with was grief. And I was asked the question about grief, and I said to the lecturer, that is something that I try to avoid. Even for members, if you go to the hospital, I just would not show up. I'm not good with it. I don't know what to say.
But I've heard that sometimes you
just don't say anything. Right.
Right.
But I feel that I should. So I try to stay. It's not my, as you would say, cup of tea. But as a counselor, you have to do it. Eventually, you have to get to do it. But sometimes for us, caring means going to the Bible and saying to people, you should not feel this way. Even Christ himself, in Gethsemane, said, Father, if it be possible, now give me the cup. I don't want to drink it. But in the end there, he said, nevertheless, not my will. And so we have to be willing to say, yes, Fran, I am hearing you. You're feeling this way. How can I help? We just can't pass off and say, pray about it, and so on. Yes, prayer comes in. There's a part for that. But there's also an aspect where they may need some external help from a professional. Because some things don't just go away like that. So yes, we are caring people. But what I want to say in a nutshell is that we need to connect with individuals more on an emotional level. And in doing so, some of us need training as to how we are going to deal with individuals, because we will say the wrong thing. Good intentions, but we say the wrong thing and we drive people further away from getting the healing that they so desire.
Yes, thanks very much for those comments, because over the past several months of doing this discussion series, I've come to realize that we are short of counselors in our schools, in our workplaces. Generally speaking, there seems to be a shortage of counselors. And it therefore means that we need more counselors, yes, but in the meantime, because it seems like counselors take a while to train, to really get qualified, right? I think you need like at least a master's to really be called a qualified counselor. But in the meantime, there's a lot that the society can do. There's a lot that we can do in our little friend networks, maybe a Sabbath school class, the AY unit, your bands, whatever. You still have bands? All right? Whatever little clique group you have, that connection. Yes, you might have a WhatsApp group, but WhatsApp group is not what we're talking about. It has its role, yes. But you still need that in-person, face-to-face, bonding time, eat and chat and play together, and yes, that physical contact. All right, like tomorrow our church is having a cook-off at Warku. All right, it's years since we had one of those. That was probably about 10 years ago, since we had something like that. But, it's those kinds of experiences. And as you were speaking, it brought to mind in the book of Acts, where it says the church had all things common. What would that look like if that was really a reality for us today? What would having all things common look like, right? It would be revolutionary. Because, and breaking bread daily, right? That would be such a witness to the society. I agree with Sister Holder that yes, we have, caring. There's a lot of care. I've felt the care of the brethren. I've felt, that connection, that empathy, from the church through the years, right? But it seems that, I think we would agree that there are some aspects in which we are still falling short. As Sister Holder said, that connection, ensuring that we are going that extra mile. And this is not an easy thing. Because in order for you to open up, in order for somebody to open up to you, you also have to open up to them, and it requires a certain amount of vulnerability. That sometimes, I'm an introvert by nature. I really don't make friends very easily. All right, I don't like to talk much. You might not believe that, but generally speaking, I just do this because I have a purpose for doing this. Normally, I don't mind staying home for the day and just reading a book. All right? But because of the calling that God has placed on our lives, as believers in Christ, we know we have a purpose, we have a mission, and it's an urgent one. Right? So, God will give us the skills that we need. Where we feel we're deficient, if you feel like, boy, I'm not a talker, or I'm not that friendly, chatty kind of person, God will give us, by the Holy Spirit, the skills that we need to reach out and really connect with people, not just on the surface, but, really bond with people in a way that they see that you mean good for them. You really want this, you mean them well, not just for now, but for eternity. All right, so there's this kind of lingering question that we have when it comes to healing from hurt. And this is it always possible to heal? Why this came up is because aside the actual comment that was made to me that sparked this particular discussion about healing from hurt. We were in a discussion in church, and a brother was making a comment, and this is a grown man, right? I would say grown hardback man, right? And he was making a comment that referenced something that happened in his childhood. And he started to tear up. Right? Now, it was so, let's say, palpable. It was, it's almost like the hurt was this morning. Right? It's like as he was speaking, and I forget what the exact discussion was, but it caused him to bring up something from his childhood, and it made him tearful as a man. And it said that, that there was still that lingering, pain there. And I said, I I was a little bit confused, or still a little bit confused by it, and maybe the councillors can help me with this. Is it that he should have gotten over that by now? Or is it he's showing that he's a real man by letting his emotions, you know, be displayed like that? Or does he need some further therapy, you know? Is it really possible for us to completely heal from some of these traumas that we experience?
Let me say that trauma is real. It is real and it affects people. A lot of people believe that. I've heard it over and over, you don't have to go to no counselor. Tough it out. You're a man. You're a big woman. Them kind of things. Trauma. And the reason why it is real and it hurts even in adulthood, it's because it robbed us of our childhood. The child is supposed to be a happy, free-spirited person. But when the child is dependent on protection all the time because of something that is happening to them or somebody for them, it can affect that person. And when it starts affecting in childhood, if it is not addressed, it will continue to affect the person in adulthood. And one of the things that I want you to identify as adults is something that is called codependency. What is it? Codependency. Now we become codependents mainly. I don't want to say it's always because, I want to say it, but I will still say mainly. Mainly because of those childhood traumas that are unresolved. And let me say this, to resolve a matter, we have to deliberately set out to resolve it. Are you with me?
Yes.
Because I can use myself as an experience. I grew up in Mallow Village, Sion Hill. And I grew up in the 70s, 80s, when Sion Hill was really bantan. And I grew up on the rough side of the mountain as a young man. And when I got married, I started having boys. As a matter of fact, I don't have any girls, I have all boys. If I were to train my boys, the way I was the way I was brought up, I don't think I was trained that way, but I went my own way. Because, you know, in those days, you go your own way, you follow crowd and you go your own way. I don't know to what extent it is today. But if I were to train my sons the way I was brought up, and I am saying brought up because I know my mother tried, but she was a kind of softy person, and she was the only one in home. And I really abused it. I really abused it as a young man. My boys would have been con men, drug dealers, probably hitmen. Because these are the side effects of childhood trauma, you know, that are unresolved. We vent it in different things. And we become codependents in the society. A lot of the men who are doing things out there are codependent. What is codependency? It is the total reliance on somebody to help us to get along. So we tend to ignore ourselves and wait on the person to approve us. And there are 4 types of codependency that I want us to identify, and I want you to sort yourself and see if you know someone. You may not be an example, but you might know someone. The enabler. The enabler is the one who goes out of the way, even hurting oneself to help the other person. At my pain, I will go out trying to hurt other people. Trying to help, other people. So I ignore me totally, and I believe I'm doing something righteous. So I go, now in itself, that is not a bad thing. But to what extent am I ignored? Because God doesn't want us to do that. He said it in his words, love your neighbor as yourself. But the enabler, the codependent enabler, it doesn't pay attention to that text. They will go on their face trying to help others at the expense of him or herself. I'm going to have to do it briefly. Then we have the controller. The controller is the one who just controls. And the controller don't trust anybody. I asked my friend who sang the special, and I will trust, one of my favorite. Do you find it easy to trust? I had to ask her because I came here and I know I was going to talk about trust. I asked her if she find it easy to trust, and she smiled at me. I said, sometimes I find it hard. I answered the question for her because I know that's what she wanted to say. She said yes. Because really, we find it hard to trust people, and the controller find it hard to trust people. And the main reason for it is because there's an inside fear. There's a fear inside of me that says, if I trust people, I will be disappointed. And so the controller doesn't trust others easily. Then there is the people pleaser. This is different than the enabler. The people pleaser wants to do things just to get approval. They can't stand criticism. So they will die just to get that approval. If we find ourselves at those extremes, then we know that there's something might be wrong, because God wants us to be balanced. Don't be like Donald Trump. Donald Trump tells you plain talk, he's thin-skinned. Don't criticize me. I can't stand it. And I want to be in charge. If you want a perfect example of a codependent controller, Donald Trump is it. Then the final one is the martyr, the one who will kill him or herself, sacrifices everything, even the clothes on their back. The saying, they give even the clothes on the back. Again, this is not a bad thing, but what is the motive? And so people go about these things because of things that are going on in their mind. They're not coping with it. So in order to cope, they find these avenues. So to know if you are, if anybody you know is in that situation or in one of them, are they doing it just to cope? At the end of the day, do they go home feeling empty inside? Because if we do these things with a balanced heart, we're going to feel happy when we go home. But a lot of people go home and, boy, they say, I just wasted my time. I did this and I feel, So we have to be careful about it. Trauma in childhood affects adults in what is called codependency. And there's where we need the help.
Well, thanks for those. Get into a little bit of the psychology there. Just a little teaser for you to do your own research and get some more clarity on those.
Yeah,
I was wondering, as you spoke, where does, I often hear about this term, narcissism?
Narcissistic behavior.
Where does that fit into that?
Well, the control is very narcissistic.
Okay.
The controller just want to hear about self, please self, say good things about self. Just
Can you be narcissistic and be in church?
Well, leaders generally are narcissistic, I mean, some narcissism is not bad, but the extreme is bad. Where you cannot stand criticism at all. Every conversation, no matter how it starts, it ends on talking about self. So you can understand a narcissist cannot have a conversation, hold a conversation without bringing self in the picture. They must find some avenue to bring in self. Boast on self, brag about self, talk about self. If they don't have something to talk about themselves, somebody in the family, in their family, is that possible.
As you mentioned, leaders being susceptible to that, it's really something to be careful about, because I heard of a situation, and again, I'm not going to name any names, but somebody young woman was sexually abused at a church, all right? And this has caused the individual to, of course, to write off church. They don't want to go to any church, they don't want to hear anything about church, and the individual, they would visit, church on occasion if they're invited for certain occasions, but it has caused them to just, spiritually decline. And they were coming from a situation where they were probably the only Christian in the home, all right? And here they were in supposedly a safe environment, the church, right? And I heard of another situation where this is in the United States, where this supposed prophet, a lot of prophets around nowadays, proclaimed the prophet, a self-proclaimed prophet, enticed a young woman into his ministry under the guise that he wanted her, the calling of God was on her life, and he wanted her to become a part of his ministry. And eventually he enticed her into a sexual relationship because the Lord revealed to him that she was supposed to be his wife. Now, you know, these kind of things make me very upset, very angry. As a father of two girls, right? And it is really, when Jesus said in the last days you're going to have false prophets and false teachers, is no lie. They're all over, they're multiplying so much nowadays. But it comes into this discussion about hurt because people are using the guise of spirituality and using in the name of God, abusing people. You know, I believe as Jesus said, people like this are going to be, you know, beaten with many stripes. It is so much more serious from a spiritual point of view if you name the name of Christ, as Paul said, to depart from iniquity. And as a church then, you know, and this extends not just to our church, but all churches, therefore incumbent on us to deal with these situations when they arise, right? We cannot afford to cover, you know, people's wrongdoing. These things need to be addressed as soon as possible. Urgently, disciplinary action needs to be taken as part of the healing process. And that is something that's a whole nother discussion. Right? I don't have time to get into that. But, you know, how do we begin to at least deal with that as a church? Disciplinary action and, you know, addressing people's feeling, okay, I can't go back to church because I was hurt.
I think one of the first things we need to do is to acknowledge that the person was hurt. Again, we can do, and sometimes we do more harm than good. So I was abused by an elder, and I have reported that to the head of the church, several members, and they did not even acknowledge it. And acknowledge here means, first of all, to listen actively. You're listening with everything and you're showing empathy. You're giving unconditional positive regard, all of these things that as we use as counselors. And you're entering into the person's feelings. And the person must know that. And the person will know that by your body language when you're relating the issue. That's the first thing. Because sometimes we trivialize people's hurt. That's a small thing. You make that affect you? It's a small pinch. But it is small for you, but for me, it is like a surgical wound because it has really affected me. So the first thing I would say is to really acknowledge that this thing took place. We express our sympathy and also we show empathy towards the individual. And then we begin to take the next step, disciplinary action, censorship, whatever. And there are times, especially if a minor is involved, where we need to report that to the church authorities. The Bible says that we must deal with our own situation. We mustn't take it to the court, right? But in this case, in some cases, things have to be taken to the court.
Oh, yes.
And this would also bring about healing for the individual. Because this is something we can't say, oh, and it's because the elder or the pastor, and we love him so much, and, you know, we love her, because females can also abuse others. Then we are going to pass it off and cover it down. Yes. So it begins first by acknowledging, expressing sympathy and showing empathy. And where it needs to be taken to the court, we need to do that. That doesn't mean we don't love the pastor, the elder, or the member. We love, but there's due process, and we cannot, as a church, be encouraging wrong. God forgives, but we must also deal with the consequences of our action.
Yeah, and let me say this, that especially for the person who reaches to the point where they're contemplating ending life, the person who is contemplating dying has reached to the point where reasoning is not cohesive anymore, it's not coordinated, and they can't see the way on the other side of the pain. Now the pain is so severe, and most times, almost all the time, the pain is psychological. It is not so much physical pain, people bear that. They take an Advil or something and they rub it out and then they massage it and band it up and they bear the pain physically. But the pain that is in the head, in the mind, is the one that is hotter. And it is hotter because you can't put your finger on it. So, as counselors, and I am saying that meaning everybody here right now, as counselors, what you need to do is see if you could try your best in prayer. You know, you're praying all the time. They don't really want to hear prayer anymore either, but you're praying in your heart, asking God to help you. Ask God to help you to help that person to separate the pain from the being. How can I separate that pain that they can't bear? And when they can learn, when an individual can learn to separate that pain, they will start to begin to heal. As a counselor, what I do, and I have had some cases in my life that I had to deal with as a Christian, as a pastor, as a counselor, I try to separate that pain. So I ask the person things like, does it have a color? If you were to give it, if they might say, I don't know, no, but then you don't, you want them, what you want them to do is talk, right? Speak, huh? You want that person to get on to speaking. So if it doesn't have a color, and suppose you were to add a color to it, what color would you give it? What color would people normally say is the pain that they have? Or one of the color usually is gray, or bright red, meaning that blood is going to be shed, or I feel like shedding blood, these kind of things. And then I may ask them, does it have a shape? But again, you want to get the person to talking, you're trying to separate them from the pain, because they don't really want to die. They just want to get rid of the pain. Remember that. People who are thinking about killing self doesn't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But if they can only get rid of the pain, the next day life will be beautiful. And so forth and so on. Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Can it see? Can it hear? So you're appealing to the senses of the person. You're trying to get to the consciousness, deep in the consciousness, and so forth and so on. And by the time they reach there, then you will say, okay, seeing that we are speaking, the next time you get that feeling again, give me a call. And have that person make a promise. You will not commit suicide until you call me. I had one call like that. And I asked the person, what color is the phone? How long is the cord? Okay, you want the person to talk. Are you with me? You was trying to separate the pain. Where are you standing? Do you have any shoes on? So anything that you could think about as a counselor, you entertain the conversation. And if you rest down that phone and step outside, you think we can meet outside and talk a little bit before you commit suicide? You're not telling the person to stop it, but you want the person to bring you in their world. Okay? And as they get into your world, you can help them to separate themselves from the pain. Okay, we can talk about, just a few days ago, the sun was very high still, and it's just 6 o'clock.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to close here and take a few questions from the audience, but I just want to give last closing comments and just mention, a few years ago, I was introduced to this, I think some of us may have done this course, called Psychological First Aid. Ever heard of, anybody ever did that? Yeah? But if you go online, you can do a course like that. It's pretty short to complete, and it's for laypersons. We're not professional counselors, but we can take this course, and it will give us some tips in terms of how to deal with persons that might present with, depression, suicide, and you got also some ideas to how you can direct the individual to professionals, who may be able to help them in their particular situation. All right, so we're going to close here. Any final comments, and then we'll take any questions, maybe a couple of questions from the audience.
Before the questions.
Yeah.
So I want to say that a lot of hurt, yes, we have all been hurt. And one of the things, when I am hurt by someone, one of the things that I do, I relax, think about the hurt, and before I retaliate, I think of how many times have I hurt Christ? Seriously. This is me seriously. Especially the hurt I find is really bad, and I really want to tell you something. I want to confront you. I ask myself, if I go to confront Brother Young, what would happen at the end of the confrontation? Would it be worse? Does he know that I'm hurt by it? Was it intentional? I grew up maybe a little people pleaser, maybe. And I'm saying this because I don't like to be around people when I know that they don't either appreciate me or there's going to be some friction between us. It makes me very, very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. I don't know how to relate. You don't have to be chummy in my body. But at least I can, we can say the basics. So if I am hurt, I actually sit down and assess the situation. And I have found that hurt stays with me a little longer if I don't choose to forgive. And I think that's one of the first things that we can address individually as we deal with hurt by others. I want us to remember that forgiveness plays a critical and vital role. Remember our Father's prayer, it says what? Forgive us our debt as we. So that's the condition. We can't go to God and we've done so many bad things to God during the course of a day. We've said maybe 100 times, 50 times. And somebody did one thing. And we want to hold it up in our chest. We want to hold it long. But when we go to God the very night and we confess, we want God to forgive us when? Immediately. But yet somebody will do something or say something and we hold that person for a very, very long time. And there are Christians who would say, I will not forgive. Forgiveness does not mean excusing wrongdoing or forgetting the pain. It is choosing to release the grip that anger and resentment have on us. Spiritually, brethren, forgiveness aligns us with God's grace. Emotionally, forgiveness frees us from bitterness that poisons our well-being. We will go doctor after doctor and they will tell you all the tests come back positive and you still have headache, you still have chest pain, your blood pressure is still up. We need to forgive. Relationally, forgiveness can restore. Forgiveness is often more for the healer than for the offender. It is a key step in moving forward. And so today, if you feel or you think that you have been hurt, and there's really no way that you can get over, I want to leave you with this. This is why it says in Ministry of Healing, page 470, the strongest argument in favor of the gospel is a loving and lovable Christian. We can't truly demonstrate that if you're unwilling to forgive. And in Christ Object Lessons, page 251, she says, nothing can justify an unforgiving spirit. Something she said, nothing can justify an unforgiving spirit. He who is unmerciful toward others shows that he himself is not a partaker of God's pardoning grace. Let's think about that as we go through our hurt. And people will hurt us. And we will hurt people too. And I'm sure we would want them to forgive us. And let's remember, if we are seeking to get to heaven, then forgiveness must be a part of our daily lives.
Let me close by saying that forgiveness is basically what I was going to say. Forgiveness begins with the self. And I tell people all the time, you have to forgive yourself. Because self-hurt is where the anger is, before it goes out to the other person. We're angry with ourselves because of what has happened to us, and more so because we allow ourselves for it to happen to us. And we are pained. So begin by forgiving yourself. And I want to just say that forgiveness is the deliberate act of releasing a person from the debt and penalty of the wrong. So relieve yourself. It's your last will. It's like writing your last will.
All right. Thank you very much, Pastor Smith and Sister Holder. Appreciate your insights this evening. And this brings us to the end of our discussion. We thank those who have joined us or viewed this program online. And we invite you to tune in to our next discussion program, which will be announced in due time. So all the best until next time around. God bless.